The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal spires of Zephyria Prime as Marcus Chen walked through the palace gardens. The human soldier had been stationed on this world for 6 months as part of the galactic peacekeeping force, and he still found himself amazed by the beauty of the Zephyrian capital. The buildings seemed to grow from the ground like living gems, their surfaces humming with soft musical tones that the alien inhabitants used to communicate. Marcus adjusted his uniform and checked his communication device. Today was supposed to be a routine patrol, just like every other day since the peace treaty had been signed between the Zephyrian Empire and their neighboring systems. The 12-world empire had been stable for over 200 years, ruled by Empress Kira, a being whose crystalline form reflected light in patterns that could mesmerize anyone who looked too long. But something felt different today. The usual harmonic songs that filled the air seemed strained, almost fearful. Marcus had learned enough of the Zephyrian frequency language to understand basic emotions, and what he was hearing made him uncomfortable. His communicator buzzed. "Marcus, report to command immediately," came the voice of Colonel Rivera, his human superior. The peacekeeping force headquarters was located in a building that had been designed to accommodate multiple alien species. As Marcus entered the main briefing room, he saw representatives from 6 different worlds gathered around a holographic display. Their faces, tentacles, and various other features all showed the same expression: worry. Colonel Rivera, a stern woman with gray hair and tired eyes, gestured for Marcus to join them. "We have a situation, Chen. Dr. Wex from the Alteran Medical Corps has some disturbing news." Dr. Wex, a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms, stepped forward. His translation device made his words sound mechanical, but the concern was clear. 3 days ago, we detected the first cases of what appears to be a biological weapon on the outer colonies of the Zephyrian Empire. The affected Zephyrians lose their harmonic abilities first, then their crystalline structure begins to break down. Within hours they die. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. How many casualties? The colony of Nexus 7 had a population of 50,000 Zephyrians, Dr. Wex continued. As of this morning, 47,000 are dead. The remaining 3,000 are showing symptoms. The room fell silent except for the low hum of the translation devices. Marcus had been to Nexus 7 just last month. It was a beautiful world with crystal cities that sang in the wind. To think of it as a graveyard was almost impossible to imagine. "We believe this is the work of the Vorthon Collective," Colonel Rivera said. "Intelligence suggests they've developed a frequency-based bioweapon, specifically designed to target Zephyrian biology. It disrupts their cellular resonance patterns." Ambassador Theiss, a reptilian being from the Saurian Federation, spoke up. "This could mean war. If the Collective is willing to use such weapons, nowhere in the galaxy is safe." Over the next few hours, the reports kept coming in. Colony after colony fell silent. The plague, as they began calling it, moved faster than anyone had expected. It seemed to spread through the Zephyrian communication networks themselves, carried by the very harmonic frequencies they used to talk to each other. Marcus was assigned to a monitoring post in the capital, keeping watch for any signs of the plague reaching Zephyria Prime. He spent his days walking through the crystal gardens and the singing towers, listening to the growing fear and the harmonics around him. On the 3rd day, he saw the first signs. A young Zephyrian in the marketplace suddenly stopped mid-song, his crystalline skin flickering and losing its usual bright glow. Within an hour, the crystal formations on his arms began to crack. By evening, he was dead. The panic spread faster than the plague itself. Zephyrians who had lived on the capital world for generations began packing their belongings, trying to reach ships that would take them to distant systems. But there was nowhere to run. Every day brought news of more worlds falling to the bioweapon. Marcus watched as the proud Zephyrian military began to crumble. Commanders who had served for decades abandoned their posts, taking their families and fleeing to the outer rim. The beautiful crystal spires that had once sung with joy now hummed with desperation and fear. Empress Kira tried to maintain order. Marcus had seen her only twice before during official ceremonies. She was unlike any being he had ever encountered, her form seeming to be made of living light contained within a crystalline structure that changed colors as she spoke. Her voice, when translated, was both gentle and commanding, but even she could not stop what was happening to her people. The palace staff began to disappear one by one. First the outer guards, then the servants, then the advisors. Each day, fewer Zephyrians answered the Empress's harmonic calls for meetings. Marcus received his evacuation orders on a gray morning when the sky was filled with ships leaving the planet. Colonel Rivera called him to headquarters one last time. "Chen, we're pulling out. The Peacekeeping Council has decided that the situation is beyond our ability to control. We have transport ships ready to take all human personnel back to Earth space." Marcus looked around the headquarters building. Most of the alien representatives had already left. Only a few humans remained, gathering their equipment and files. "What about Empress Kira?" Marcus asked. Colonel Rivera shook her head. "She's refused to leave. Says a ruler doesn't abandon her world. Even when her people have already gone, there's nothing we can do for her, Chen. The medical teams say there's no cure for this plague. The Zephyrians who stay behind are choosing to die with their world." That evening, Marcus packed his gear like he had been ordered. His transport was scheduled to leave at dawn. But as he walked through the empty palace gardens one last time, he heard something that stopped him cold. It was music, but not the usual harmonic communication of the Zephyrians. This was different, sadder, lonelier. The sound seemed to come from the main palace, from the great crystal throne room where Empress Kira held court. Marcus followed the sound through corridors that had once been filled with singing courtiers and busy officials. Now they were empty, his footsteps echoing off crystal walls that had begun to lose their glow. The palace's bioluminescent systems were failing as fewer Zephyrians remained to maintain them with their natural frequencies. The throne room was vast, with a ceiling that reached hundreds of feet above. In the center, on a throne that looked like it had been carved from a single enormous crystal, sat Empress Kira. But she was not the radiant being Marcus remembered from the ceremonies. Her crystalline form had grown dim, the bright colors faded to pale shadows. Cracks were beginning to appear along her arms and face. The same cracks Marcus had seen on the plague victims. She was singing, but her voice was weak, barely audible even in the perfect acoustics of the throne room. Marcus realized she was alone, completely alone. Her guards had left, her advisors had fled. Even her personal servants had abandoned her. The ruler of 12 star systems sat dying by herself in an empty palace. For a moment, Marcus just stood there. His orders were clear. His transport would leave in a few hours. The logical thing to do was to turn around, go back to his quarters, and prepare for evacuation like every other off-worlder on the planet. Instead, he walked forward into the throne room. Empress Kira noticed him when he was halfway across the vast floor. Her song stopped and she turned her faded eyes toward him. When she spoke, her translation device turned her harmonic words into something he could understand. "You should not be here, human soldier. The plague will spread to the palace soon. Even now I can feel it in my resonance patterns." Marcus stopped a respectful distance from the throne and gave a formal bow. "Your Majesty, I am Marcus Chen of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. I wanted to check on your condition before the evacuation." "Evacuation?" Her laugh was like the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but sadder than anything Marcus had ever heard. "There is no evacuation for me, Marcus Chen. A ruler does not flee when her people suffer, even if those people have chosen to flee themselves." Marcus looked around the empty throne room. "Where is your medical staff? Surely there must be doctors working on a treatment." "Gone," Kira said simply. "They left yesterday when the plague reached the palace district. Dr. Vell said there was nothing more they could do. The bioweapon is too specifically designed. It targets the exact frequencies our bodies use to maintain our crystalline structure." "But humans aren't affected," Marcus said, thinking out loud. "Our biology is completely different." "Yes," Kira agreed. "Your neural patterns operate on frequencies that seem to be immune to the weapon. It is why the Vorthon Collective waited until most of the peacekeeping forces were pulled back to their homeworlds before they released it. They knew you could not be harmed, but they also knew you would not stay to help a dying empire." Marcus felt something inside him rebel against those words. "Your Majesty, permission to speak freely?" Kira's dim form seemed to brighten slightly with curiosity. "Granted, they're wrong. Not all humans would leave." For the first time since he had entered the throne room, Kira looked directly at him. Her faded eyes studied his face for a long moment. "You are supposed to be on an evacuation transport, are you not?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "And yet you are here." Marcus straightened his shoulders. "Yes, Your Majesty. Kira was quiet for several minutes, her harmonic breathing the only sound in the vast room. When she finally spoke, her voice was stronger than it had been before. I have ruled for 80 years. Marcus Chen. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth of new worlds and the death of old ones. In all that time I have learned that you can judge a species not by what they do when times are good, but by what they do when everything falls apart. She paused, and Marcus could see more cracks forming along her neck and shoulders. My own people have fled. My advisors, my military commanders, my closest friends, all have chosen to save themselves rather than stand with their Empress in the final hour. I do not blame them. The plague is beyond our ability to fight, and death is not something anyone should choose lightly. Kira stood slowly from her throne, her movements careful as her crystalline joints creaked and sparked. But you, a human from a species that owes no loyalty to the Zephyrian Empire, have chosen to remain. Why? Marcus had been asking himself the same question since he walked into the throne room. His training told him to follow orders, to evacuate with the rest of the peacekeeping force. His logic told him there was nothing he could do to help. But something deeper, something that had nothing to do with training or logic, had brought him here. Because no one should die alone, he said finally, and because sometimes doing the right thing is more important than following orders. Kira stepped down from her throne and walked toward him. Up close, Marcus could see how badly the plague was affecting her. Her once brilliant crystalline skin was clouded and cracked, and her movements were slow and painful. But her eyes, those strange alien eyes that seemed to hold depths of wisdom and sadness, were still alert and aware. You understand that staying here means you will likely die as well? Not from the plague, but when the Vorthan Collective arrives to claim their prize. They will not spare any witnesses to their crime. I understand, Your Majesty. Kira reached out one crystalline hand and gently touched Marcus's face. Her skin was warm, which surprised him. He had always imagined that crystal would be cold. Then perhaps there is hope yet for this galaxy, she said softly. If beings can still choose compassion over survival, maybe all is not lost. Marcus felt his communicator buzzing urgently. Colonel Rivera was probably wondering where he was. His transport would be leaving soon, and if he missed it, there might not be another chance to escape before the Vorthan fleet arrived. Your Majesty, he said, I'm not a doctor, but I'd like to try to help. Maybe there's something about human biology that could be useful. At the very least, I can make sure you're not alone. Kira's form seemed to grow slightly brighter, as if his words had given her some small amount of energy. You would do this? Give up your chance of escape to help a dying alien ruler? Yes, Your Majesty. For the first time since he had entered the throne room, Kira smiled. It was a beautiful expression, even on her faded and cracked face. Very well, Marcus Chen of Earth. Let us see what a human and a Zephyrian can accomplish together, even at the end of all things. As the last evacuation ships lifted off from Zephyria Prime, leaving the crystal capital empty except for the dying and the desperate, Marcus began the strangest mission of his military career. He had no idea if he could help Empress Kira, or if there was any way to fight a bioweapon specifically designed to kill her people. But he had made his choice. While everyone else had abandoned the alien Empress, he would keep her, and maybe, just maybe, that choice would matter. The first 3 days after the evacuation were the hardest. Marcus had set up a temporary medical station in the palace's old healing chambers, using equipment left behind by the fleeing medical staff. He had no formal training beyond basic field medicine, but he was determined to learn everything he could about Zephyrian biology. Empress Kira grew weaker each day. The cracks in her crystalline skin spread like frost on a window, and her harmonic voice became more strained with each passing hour, but she refused to give up. During the brief periods when the plague symptoms eased, she taught Marcus about her people's technology and biology. The bioweapon works by disrupting our natural frequency patterns, she explained one evening, as they sat in the palace's central garden. The crystal trees around them had lost most of their glow, creating an eerie twilight atmosphere. Every Zephyrian's body maintains itself through harmonic resonance. When that resonance is broken, our crystalline structure begins to fail. Marcus studied the medical scanner he had borrowed from the abandoned equipment. But human brains don't work the same way. Our neural patterns are electrical, not harmonic. Maybe that's why we're immune. Perhaps, Kira said, her voice growing weaker. But immunity and treatment are different things. That night, Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. While reviewing the medical data on his portable computer, he noticed something strange. When he had been in close contact with Kira, particularly when he had touched her face that first day, her vital readings had actually improved for several hours afterward. He woke Kira early the next morning, excitement overriding his concern for her rest. "Your Majesty, I need to run a test. Yesterday, when I was checking your pulse, your crystalline stability increased by 12% for almost 6 hours. I think human neural activity might actually interfere with the bioweapon." Kira's dim eyes focused on him with renewed interest. "Explain." Marcus pulled up the data on his screen. "Look at these readings. Every time I've been in physical contact with you, the plague symptoms slow down. It's like human brain waves create some kind of interference pattern that disrupts the weapon's frequency." Working together, they spent the next 2 days testing the theory. Marcus would place his hands on different parts of Kira's crystalline form, while she monitored her internal resonance patterns. The results were undeniable. Human neural activity, particularly when Marcus was concentrating or problem-solving, seemed to create a protective field around Kira. "It's not a cure," Marcus said as they reviewed the data, "but it's definitely slowing the progression. Your crystalline structure is actually beginning to repair itself in some areas." Kira's form had grown noticeably brighter over the past day. The cracks were still there, but they had stopped spreading, and some of the smaller ones were beginning to heal. "How long can you maintain this contact?" she asked. "I don't know. I don't feel any negative effects from it. If anything, I feel more alert when I'm helping you, like my brain is working harder to compensate." Their experiments were interrupted on the 5th day by alarms echoing through the empty palace. The Vorthan collective had arrived. Marcus ran to the palace's observation deck and looked up at the sky. Hundreds of dark ships filled the atmosphere, their sleek forms cutting through the crystal-clear air like predators circling wounded prey. The invasion fleet had come to claim their prize. "They'll land within hours," Kira said, joining him despite her weakened condition. "The few Zephyrians who remained in the outer districts will not be able to resist them." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "How many Vorthan soldiers are on those ships?" "Probably 50,000. Maybe more. They've come not just to conquer, but to study what they've done." The bioweapon was a test as much as it was an attack. Marcus looked at the empty palace around them. 2 people against 50,000 trained soldiers. The odds were impossible. But as he watched the dark ships descending toward the crystal spires of the capital, he felt something he had never experienced before. Not fear exactly, but a cold, determined anger. "Your Majesty, I need to ask you something. Is the palace's defense system still operational?" Kira's expression shifted to something Marcus hadn't seen before. "Hope." "The automated systems were shut down when the staff evacuated, but the core technology is still functional." "Why?" "Because I think it's time to show the Vorthan collective what happens when they mess with a planet under human protection." Over the next few hours, Marcus and Kira worked frantically to reactivate the palace's defenses. The Zephyrian technology was incredibly advanced, but it had been designed to work with harmonic commands that Marcus couldn't produce. However, they discovered that when Marcus concentrated while touching Kira, his neural patterns could amplify her weakened harmonic abilities enough to operate the systems. The palace came alive around them. Crystal barriers rose from the ground, energy shields flickered to life around the main buildings, and weapon platforms emerged from hidden compartments in the walls. It wasn't enough to stop an entire invasion force, but it was a start. "They're landing in the main plaza," Kira reported, watching the tactical displays. 3,000 soldiers in the first wave, with more coming down every few minutes. Marcus studied the readouts. The Vorthan soldiers were spread out across the city, but they were moving in predictable patterns toward the palace. They clearly expected no resistance. Can the palace weapons target multiple locations simultaneously? Yes, but not for long. The power systems were designed to be maintained by a full staff of technicians. Marcus made his decision. "Then we'll have to make every shot count." The first Vorthan patrol reached the palace gardens just as the sun was setting. They were tall insectoid beings with chitinous armor and energy weapons that crackled with blue electricity. Marcus watched them through the security monitors as they advanced confidently through the crystal pathways. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Marcus placed his hands on Kira's shoulders and concentrated. Through their strange neural connection, he could feel her accessing the palace's weapon systems. The crystal trees in the garden suddenly flared to life, shooting beams of concentrated energy that caught the Vorthan patrol completely by surprise. First group eliminated, Kira reported, her voice stronger than it had been in days. But more are coming. For the next hour, they played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the invasion force. Marcus would spot Vorthan soldiers on the monitors. Kira would target them with the palace weapons, and together they would eliminate small groups before the main force could organize a proper assault. But Marcus knew they couldn't keep it up indefinitely. The Vorthans were learning from each attack, adapting their tactics and bringing heavier weapons to bear on the palace defenses. Your Majesty, we need backup. Is there any way to contact the surviving Zephyrians in other systems? Kira's expression grew thoughtful. There is a possibility. The palace has a quantum communication array that can reach across the galaxy instantly, but most of my people have already written off this world as lost. What about the other species? The peacekeeping force? Anyone who might help? Kira began activating the communication systems while Marcus continued to monitor the Vorthan advance. I can try, but why would they risk their lives for a dying empire and a single human soldier? Marcus watched the screens as more Vorthan ships landed in the city. The invasion force now numbered in the tens of thousands, and they were beginning to coordinate their assault on the palace. Because someone needs to show them that the Vorthan collective can be stopped, because genocide shouldn't go unanswered, and because sometimes doing the right thing is more important than playing it safe. As Kira began broadcasting on all frequencies, Marcus prepared for what he knew would be the final assault. The palace defenses were failing, the power systems were overloading, and the Vorthan forces were massing for a coordinated attack. But then something unexpected happened. Marcus, Kira said, her voice filled with amazement as she listened to the communication array. You need to hear this. The first response came from Commander Thane of the Alteran Defense Fleet. His blue-skinned face appeared on the communication screen, stern but determined. Empress Kira, we received your transmission. The Alteran Republic has decided that the Vorthan use of bioweapons represents a threat to all civilized species. We're dispatching a battle group to assist you. The second response came from General Voss of the Saurian Federation. Your Majesty, the Federation Council has voted to intervene. No empire should fall to such cowardly weapons. We're en route with reinforcements. More responses followed. The Centauri Alliance, the Free Worlds Coalition, even some of the smaller independent systems. Species that had been neutral in galactic politics for decades were suddenly declaring their intention to help defend Zephyria Prime. I don't understand, Kira said, her crystalline form glowing brighter than it had since before the plague. Why are they willing to risk war with the collective for a dying world? Marcus smiled as he watched the tactical displays showing friendly ships jumping into the system. Because word travels fast in space. By now, everyone knows that a human soldier chose to stay behind to help you when everyone else ran away. They know that Earth's representative to the peacekeeping force refused evacuation orders to stand with an ally. But you're just one person. Sometimes one person is enough to change everything. When other species see that humans don't abandon their friends, it makes them think about what kind of galaxy they want to live in. The battle for Zephyria Prime lasted 3 days. The arriving fleets engaged the Vorthan invasion force in orbit, while Marcus and Kira coordinated ground defenses from the palace. The strange connection between human neural patterns and Zephyrian technology proved to be surprisingly effective, allowing them to control defensive systems with precision that amazed even the most experienced military commanders. But the real turning point came when other surviving Zephyrians began returning to the fight. Inspired by their Empress's refusal to surrender, and the human soldier who had stayed to help her, they came back from the distant systems where they had fled. They brought with them knowledge of how to combine human neural patterns with Zephyrian biotechnology to create treatments for the plague. Dr. Wex from the Alteran Medical Corps was the first to understand the implications. The human brain activity doesn't just interfere with the bioweapon, he explained to the assembled fleet commanders. It actually teaches Zephyrian immune systems how to fight back. We can mass-produce this treatment. Within weeks, the cure was being distributed throughout the former plague zones. Zephyrian colonies that had been written off as dead began to recover. The Empire, which had seemed doomed to extinction, started to rebuild. The Vorthan Collective, faced with a united galaxy that refused to tolerate their biological warfare, agreed to a peace treaty that included reparations for the victims of the plague and the complete dismantling of their bioweapon programs. Marcus stood in the palace gardens 6 months later, watching as the crystal trees sang their harmonious songs in the morning light. Empress Kira approached him, her crystalline form now fully healed and radiating the brilliant colors he remembered from their first meeting. "The Galactic Council has officially recognized you as a hero of the Alliance," she said, holding out a crystal medal that pulsed with inner light. 12 species have offered you citizenship, and Earth has promoted you to the rank of Colonel. Marcus accepted the medal but didn't put it on. "Thank you, Your Majesty, but that's not why I stayed." "I know," Kira said, her harmonic voice carrying a warmth that the translation device somehow managed to convey. "You stayed because it was the right thing to do. Because you believe that no one should face their darkest hour alone." Marcus looked around the garden, now filled with Zephyrian children learning to sing the old songs and adults working to rebuild their world. "Do you ever regret it? All the suffering your people went through?" Kira considered the question for a long moment. "The plague was a terrible thing. We lost millions of lives and came closer to extinction than any species should. But it also taught us something valuable about the nature of friendship and loyalty. We learned that some bonds transcend species, politics, and even survival instincts." She paused, watching a group of young Zephyrians practicing their harmonic abilities in the crystal pools. Before the plague, the Zephyrian Empire was powerful but isolated. We believed we could handle any threat alone. Now we know that true strength comes from the connections we make with others, from the willingness to stand together when everything seems hopeless. Marcus nodded, understanding, "And sometimes the most important choice you can make is simply to stay." "Yes," Kira agreed. "Sometimes staying is the most powerful thing you can do." As they walked through the rebuilt palace, Marcus reflected on the events that had brought them to this point. He had made a simple decision: to refuse evacuation orders and stay with a dying alien ruler. That choice had sparked a chain of events that saved an empire and united multiple species against a common threat. It had shown the galaxy that humans, despite being relatively new to interstellar politics, possessed something that older, more advanced civilizations sometimes forgot: the stubborn determination to do what was right, regardless of the cost. The Zephyrian Empire survived and prospered, but more importantly, the alliance forged in those desperate days became the foundation for a new era of cooperation among the stars. Species that had been suspicious of each other for centuries began working together, inspired by the example of a human soldier who had chosen loyalty over survival. Marcus never regretted his decision to stay. Years later, when other crises threatened the galaxy, people would remember the story of the human who refused to abandon the alien Empress. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that sometimes the smallest act of compassion could change the course of history. And in the crystal gardens of Zephyria Prime, where the trees sang songs of friendship and loyalty, that story would be remembered forever.